This is TV Podcast Industries, and we're back with Star Trek Picard, Episode 4, Absolute Candor. Jolan, true fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, this is TV Podcast Industries, and we're back with Star Trek Picard, Episode 4, Absolute Candor. My name is Derek, one of your hosts.
Jolan, true fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, I am one of your other hosts, John, and our third host, Chris, has beamed off planet Earth into a business trip.
Well, kind of. So it's just the two of us this time.
It certainly is. So
that's fun. We've done this before.
Exactly.
Quite a few times.
Yes, absolutely. Remember, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, you can catch our podcast on any Federation or Romulan supporting podcast player. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, you name it. You can head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com and you can choose the podcast catcher of your choice to listen to our Star Trek Picard. And of course, over there, you can also, if you want to leave voicemail feedback in any way, you can go on there and leave up to 90 seconds of your dulcet tones using the right-hand side tab on the website.
And if you've only been listening to us for the Star Trek Picard podcast on its own feed, if you go over to the TV Podcast Industries feed, we've actually done another podcast this week. We covered Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harleen Quinzel, I think is the new name for it.
No, the new name for it is Harley Quinn Birds of Prey. They've shortened it down a bit, but it is nowhere near as exciting, that title, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, fantabulous. What a great word to use in a film title.
Definitely. I did see comments as to how that actually got through the full writing process from the start. It's one of those ones that somebody writes at the top of their page when they're writing their first script, and people are shocked that it made it to the cinema under that name. But it's a really good fun film. If you want to hear something else that we're covering, check us out over on tvpodcastindustries.com and you'll get that podcast. But without Chris here, let's get into the details of this episode, John.
Yes.
The episode was written by Michael Chabon again. I noticed something in this episode. Am I being really stupid that I didn't notice that the character Chabon is kind of pronounced quite similar to the writer of the show, Michael Chabon? Do you think he kind of titled
I think he may have tweaked it just a little. Yeah, definitely.
But this episode brings back one of the favourites of Star Trek The Next Generation. It is directed by Jonathan Frakes. He played First Officer Will Riker on Star Trek The Next Generation, directed many episodes of that show and most of the Star Trek series after that, did 2 Star Trek movies, including First Contact and Insurrection, and this is the first of 2 episodes that he's directed this season on Picard. Nice to have Jonathan Frakes back in the fold.
Definitely. He is our number one director. Mm-hmm. Of course he is. Great to see him. And that photo you showed just before as well, which is really nice of him and Patrick Stewart just having a little bit of a giggle and a laugh on set. As Jonathan Frakes is wearing the Man from Del Monte hat and suit that he has put Patrick Stewart in at the start of this episode. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They seem to be really enjoying themselves on set.
I think we need to put that up on the website just so that everyone can have a gander. But it's a nice little shot. You realize how much of a group the Next Generation cast were, I think.
Yeah, they really did seem like a family by the end of that show, didn't they? Yeah, I'll put the photograph up on our website at tvpodcastindustries.com/Picard Candor, I think I've called this episode. So check that out on the webpage there and you'll see the photograph. John, do you want to give us the synopsis for this episode?
Sure. The crew's journey to Freecloud takes a detour when Picard orders a stop at the planet Vashti, where Picard and Raffi relocated Romulan refugees 14 years earlier. Upon arrival, Picard reunites with Elnor, a young Romulan he befriended during the relocation. Meanwhile, Narek continues his attempts to learn more about Soji, while Narissa's impatience with his lack of progress grows.
Grows into strangulation.
Yeah, exactly. What was that about? I was kind of thinking, is she trying to kill him here, or is this just kind of fair warning?
I think she's willing to. I think is where it goes to. I really like this character. She's such a good villainess.
Yeah, definitely.
We've mentioned before about Peyton List working on Gotham and playing the character of Poison Ivy on there. Not getting a huge amount of time on screen in that show, but here you can really tell she's amping up the villainess. She's really, really good.
Yeah, really good. I mean, I was wondering whether it was kind of part of the Romulan species that siblings might have this kind of strangulation sort of back and forth between themselves, you know, a bit like, you know, as kids fighting with your older brother or something.
Well, maybe,
like that.
yeah, it's quite similar to that. I'm not sure whether I've ever tried to strangle any of my 4 older brothers.
Well, no, likewise, but certainly as well, my sisters never wore sort of very tight cat suits,
sexy cat suits, and wake you up in your bed.
No, exactly. Thank the Lord.
True. Let's get on to our main points for the episode. We break these out into our biggest moment, our prime directive, our medium moment is our Omega directive, and our final moment is our make it so number 1.
We must face the ramifications of the prime directive.
John, do you want to give us your prime directive?
Yes, I do. It is the Qowat Milat, this new Romulan society, cult, sect, creed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I really enjoyed finding more about the Romulan sort of society here in this show. They're one of my kind of favorite villains, I suppose, and it was great sort of learning about this Chad Vash, this kind of old cabal that's even kind of more secretive, more underground. They're kind of like the Romulan version of the Illuminati, right. You know, in that sense. They're kind of operating behind the scenes, and we get to a new group here, a new cabal. And I think what I really like about it is just how it adds so much texture and different layers to Romulan society. You know, normally it was the Romulans were the shoulder pads with the pointy hair, and, you know, just pure evil. But I really liked, seeing this group of female nuns, and only this sect of nuns that they're called assassins, but only females can become these assassins, and they practice this way of absolute candor, which is effectively where they really don't allow emotions and intellect. They don't put a barrier down between them. They allow it all to be very candid about what they say, which is absolutely going against the grain of the main thrust of Romulan society. And
Romulan society is massively secretive in that they don't like telling anybody anything.
Exactly.
This feels very like a complete opposite to the Vulcans, who maintain this barrier between their emotions and what they say at all times. Their emotions can't affect what they say at all. Whereas this society, they specifically will always tell you exactly what they're thinking. There's a really nice moment where they show that with Elnor, where he says, "My feelings are hurt," to Captain Picard instantly. He tells him exactly what's going on in his head the second it happens. And you realize from Picard, this could be very difficult if you were having this kind of conversations all the time. You know, you realize just from the reaction from Patrick Stewart in that moment, you realize it could be massively difficult if everybody went around telling you exactly how their emotions are affected by everything you say at all times, you know?
No, absolutely. I mean, I just thought it was really kind of nicely done. You know, we're on this planet Vashti. It's a former Romulan relocation hub from the supernova. So we see Picard there 14 years previously. But I think the other thing I really liked, you know, you kind of got a very different view of the Romulan society. Everyone seemed happy, very light-hearted there 14 years ago. Now it's changed in that time period, but and we'll come on to that a bit later in one of your points. But I think I really just enjoy exploring these really well-known groupings and species through the Star Trek universe. You know, from with Romulans in this case with Picard, but also with Discovery with the Klingons as well. And just layering and texturizing these species. You know, I thought it was interesting to see sort of people of many different kind of races of Romulan that you saw on Vashti as they were being relocated. I think importantly, though, the Qowat Milat are sworn enemies of the Tal Shiar. I suppose they are the polar opposite. And that's really kind of nice here because of Picard coming back 14 years later, having to take this detour effectively, or asking for this detour to stop at Vashti in order that he can see if the nuns and the Qowat Milat will bind their sword to his cause, of which there's one criterion required, that it is a worthy cause. And I like that by the end of it, that criterion of worthy is that it is a hopeless cause, which is kind of like, okay, so they really like to set themselves a challenge then, but effectively they are, very well trained fighters and assassins, and we get some good evidence of that.
And they'll only help people who cannot possibly do the job themselves, basically. I love the reaction from Dr. Girardi in the background when she hears that this is a hopeless cause, that she's gone out into space on this mission that's absolutely hopeless.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I like with this kind of detour from on the way to Freecloud is, I think it's that real pathos that you get from Patrick Stewart here. And I like that moment where Raffi is trying to really dissuade him from going here. She knows that he has that relationship. He knows this was the place where he learns about the attack on Mars, and where his big grand plan effectively falls apart in terms of rescuing and saving different planets that would be caught in the supernova that are in the Romulan Empire. And he just turns to her and he says, I may never pass this way again. Yeah. I just thought that was really nicely done, because I really did get a sense here of the age of Picard in this episode. Even when he's there on Vashti, in the flashback, effectively, 14 years previously, he's there in that kind of Panama hat, looking like the man from Del Monte, which for fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, it was an advert on television back in the 80s for tinned pineapple and tinned peaches. And it was that only the man from Del Monte would say yes to the best, for the best quality peaches to be tinned. So yes. Strange things happen in the world of TV podcast industries.
I don't know whether that makes more sense or less sense to you.
I know, exactly. Yes, it's just a strange connection. But the man from Del Monte wore that kind of Panama hat and pale suit. But I think it really aged Patrick Stewart, that outfit, that costume choice. But I kind of quite liked it, because he is 94 in this show, Picard is 94. Yeah. He's in his 90s, and I kind of liked it. And I think what was really interesting was just how it contrasted with Elnor, actually. So the vigor, tempestuousness of youth, as opposed to the sageness of old age from Jean-Luc Picard. So I think, yes, the Qowat Milat is my big thing, because I just love how this show is delving into the world of the Romulans. And I can't wait to see this hopeless cause up against the Tal Shiar, maybe something even worse in the Chad Vash. We still don't know that yet, but with one of their sworn enemies, the Qowat Milat. It's just, I'm enjoying it. I all of a sudden, the Romulan world feels like it's just exploded in the mouth, kind of thing. It's like tastes and sensations.
No, I agree with you. And it is something the show can do, and something that Discovery took full advantage of doing. This idea that, originally when some of these characters were created and some of these species were created many, many years ago, it was kind of put them in a makeup trailer, make them up to look like this kind of character, and then we'll give them a backstory as we go along. Whereas now they're able to realistically say, you're talking about, 900 million people in a universe. Well, they're not all going to be the same color, and they're not all going to have the same skin type, and they're not all going to have the same haircut, So I like that you're able to, just in a very small scene like this, you're able to show that there would be differences among many planets and many, even just one side of the planet to the other, there's massive differences. So I like that they're doing that in this series. And it's nice to see more of such a secretive society like the Romulans. You know, there's so much going on there, and you get the impression that no information got out from there that didn't pass through the High Council effectively. So, it went through the Tal Shiar, and they blocked any information at all about the society. So suddenly these big reveals about what type of groups were in the Romulan world do come as kind of surprise, because we've never seen them before at all. So it's kind of nice seeing those extra details beyond what we've seen before. I agree with you.
No, I definitely agree. And it's also just to note that Elnor is now another companion on the ever-growing roster of Picard's hopeless cause. And so this is another one of the characters at the premiere who's now been introduced here, just so, you know, this is a full-on character within the Picard show.
Yes, played by Evagora. He was so thankful to be on this show. It was really sweet, actually, when he was in front of the audience saying how much he appreciated being on the show. He is a very young guy himself, and I hadn't seen him in anything before this. I think he's been in a few things, but I hadn't seen him in anything before this. And he has that kind of innocent look about him early on in the episode. So as you say, it'd be a really nice interplay between him and Jean-Luc, you know, to see the massive difference in their age and how they approach things. It'll be interesting to see the two of them together.
Well, and it's that kind of father-son relationship that Picard had 14 years ago as he was relocating the Romulans. So it's an interesting dynamic for Jean-Luc Picard whilst on an adventure.
Yeah, definitely. And I did find that really interesting that we had that moment with Picard where you're seeing him almost as a family man, that moment earlier on when he's seeing Elnor for the first time. And he's truly saying to him, I do like you as a person. I think that we have a good friendship and a good relationship. Yes, I have a reputation for not liking children, but I've come to respect you and come to like you. I think that's a nice change in Picard, because it is something that people who have watched The Next Generation know. There are episodes where they talk about him not liking any children at all. They've talked about that before. So it's a nice development of the character, saying that he is open to anybody.
Definitely.
You know, he's open to making any kind of friendship with anybody. So
again, the softening with age and the wise Picard, as you know, even though he said that, he always appreciated, you know, Wesley and all the kids as well on Picard Day, when they just celebrated him being him, I suppose, and being the captain of the ship.
Yeah, everybody loves to have a day celebrated for them, don't they?
So, Derek, what's your prime directive?
I'm also speaking about the planet Vashti as well. I just think seeing this planet 14 years after Starfleet pulled out of the rescue effort, and what's happened to the Romulans since that were left behind, I think it's really important to show that on the show. They've kind of mentioned it offhandedly a few times about that Picard had this massive mission to save as many people as he possibly could. It's an insurmountable mission. It's something that could never possibly work when you have millions and billions of people need to be evacuated. It could never have ended with everybody being saved, which is something that Picard wouldn't have ever given up on in the past. And him being made to give up on it, especially after promising these people that he would come back and help them and save them. He promised that he would find a new home for Elnor, for example. He promised the people that he would be back to visit them. And knowing here that we see him coming back 14 years later, having not been able to do anything, and the changes that have happened to this really well put together refugee station for these people. You know, it was a new planet where everybody was moving to for the first time. And what we see is that they've changed. They've started to have signs up saying Romulans only in restaurants, that kind of stuff. So they've clearly moved to being very different people. It kind of reminded me very slightly of The Wrath of Khan. Do you remember the kind of storyline in Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, where Khan had been put on a planet back in the original series, and 20 or 30 years later they come back to the planet and find it was devastated by a massive natural disaster, and Kirk had thought that he'd done the right thing by these people by leaving them a place to live, but had never checked back in on them, and turned out that a disaster had struck, killing many of them. So I kind of like that the relationship between that. Picard's going through something similar. He's hopeful that they were left in a place that was being protected, but he didn't check in to see whether this was still a safe place for them. We hear from Rios when he's coming back that the people who were responsible for taking care of it, the Fenris Rangers, could no longer protect the territory, and they've kind of pulled back. So they're kind of defenseless as well as everything else. They've got this massive defense grid around their and their planet, of course, but aren't as protected as Picard would have liked. So we're led to this, I suppose, a big speech moment from Picard, as mentioned earlier on in the season, that Picard is well known for his speeches, and he has his moment where he's able to apologize to the people there for everything they've gone through. He's saying that he failed them, and the results for them is terrible pain and loss. And he genuinely apologizes to them because he never expected to be leaving them behind for the last time 14 years ago. And it comes across quite well with the people that are there and people that are there to hear it. But I am sure for the previous 14 years, there are people there, some of them now headless, who have blamed him for their loss in life, you know?
Yeah, I really like this. I'm wondering if there's people out there that think the show is actually undermining Jean-Luc Picard from the Next Generation in terms of just, you know, he had the moment with the Admiral Clancy where she basically tells him to F off. Mm-hmm. You've kind of got the moment with Raffi, and now you have this kind of humble pie of Picard here on Vashti. But I mean, I don't think of it like that. I actually just think it's really, really good. And I think it just shows that he's human. Yeah. It shows that he has error. And even Jean-Luc talks about how in trying to be perfect, it was the enemy of good. That he tried to be perfect because that's a meticulous and so precise in everything he's done. And we know that from the Next Generation, that was his way of doing things. Yeah. Being organized, making sure everything was right. And in trying to do that here, he couldn't save as many people as he would have liked to because it took longer to do. And then, but in that moment, you know, there's the attack on Mars, the banning of the synths, and the pulling of the plug of this relief and rescue effort by the Federation. And I like that he is having to combat those, because I think, you know, he is an older guy in this, and it's about him combating his past and his past mistakes. And I really like that. And as you say, I think the speech that he gives in that square, is really, really nicely done. And of course, you know, he's being challenged here. We have an old senator from the Romulan High Council and the Empire sort of challenging him, saying, you don't know who I am, but, you know, when we were doubting ourselves at the most, you came in, gave your fine speech, and made us doubt ourselves even more, that about our own ingenuity. We were spread around the galaxy. We were dissipated. We were weakened by, you know, so he sees this as a Federation strategy and ploy to kind of weaken the Romulan Empire. For Picard, he sees himself as a humanitarian, and that it's not that. And I think that's a really interesting sort of battle between the Romulan senator here and Picard. And ultimately it ends up with a nice sword fight. Yeah.
Absolutely. And he's lost his head. It does kind of add to the theory. You know, it's one of those ones where it needed to be said by somebody, some character on the show who is a Romulan, needed to be very clear about why some Romulans don't agree with what the Federation did by evacuating all of the Romulan planets. You needed to have that voiced by a character in the show. I think at this stage we're 4 episodes in now, and we don't really understand why the Romulans could have been responsible for the attack on Mars, for example. But I think this makes it clear that not every Romulan was massively happy about being evacuated from their space by the Federation, because they thought it was a plot. They thought it was a plot to get information from them and to break up a very strong race, effectively. So I kind of like that it was voiced in here as well.
But we do get Elnor to the rescue as well in the sword fight, because actually Picard is refusing to partake in that sword fight. And I do like his entrance coming in and taking out two of the henchmen and then effectively slicing the head off the Romulan senator. I think what's really funny, though, is just the fact that because Elnor is not Federation, because Rios is not Federation, Chabon and Loris aren't Federation, and even those people who were like Rios, like Raffi, are kind of ex-Starfleet.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of quite happy, if needs be, to kill people. And it's just the face on Picard. He's kind of like, would people just stop killing people in my presence? I'm a former Federation admiral. We don't approve of killing. It's where's the stun setting on your sword, kind of thing. I really liked that. It was, it's kind of, again, it's those two ideas buttressing up against one another and really not giving too much space to one another. You know, in a sense, the humanitarian peacekeeper of Picard who only uses force as a last resort. Yeah. And even then, it's not necessarily kill force, with someone like Elnor, who is a trained fighter and assassin who, you know, first thing he does is whip out his sword and slices off the head of the guy attacking Picard. So I like that. And
it feels like he was going into a threat to everybody else there, that Picard's now under his protection. So if anybody challenges him, this is what they'll get, kind of thing, you know?
But then exactly. But then the other two come up and say, well, you may have a sword, but that isn't going to stop this blaster, as they pull out a Romulan blaster. But luckily, they do get teleported to safety.
Exactly. And I like that Picard admonishes him with, I will tell you when to fight and when to refrain. It just sounds like a very strict guidance that Elnor is getting from Picard, which is, you know, that's going to be the interesting thing about the character as we go on, of course. That's it for my Prime Directive point. I think it's time to get on to our next one.
Implement the Omega Directive immediately.
John, what's your Omega Directive?
From one sword fight to a larger spaceship fight in the orbit of Vashti. I really liked this. You know, we finally gotten a bit of laser action, photon torpedoes going on with this fight between the Romulan bird of prey that is presumably this Candor, who is this guy going around the Quiris sector, sort of effectively causing chaos, sort of attacking worlds, subjugating people, pillaging. You know, he's kind of like the space equivalent of Vikings. And so I presume it's his bird of prey. Yeah. And the fight between this bird of prey and the La Sirena, the ship that is captained by Rios, which is nice. We finally get its name, or at least it's the first time I've noticed its name.
Yeah.
Even though it was from the credits and not from the actual show.
Yeah. I'd only seen it in, I think, one of the show's descriptions earlier on today, but I don't think it had popped up on any of the information that we'd seen in the past. But the Siren is the name of the ship, La Sirena. So yeah, so quite cool.
But this was a cool little sort of dogfight in space, and the bird of prey, the Romulan bird of prey. It did, you know, they said it was a kind of a reclaimed older model, and it certainly looks nothing like the bird of prey ships from the Next Generation.
Oh, yeah.
At all. It actually, I think the thing that I liked about it was it almost had a similar look to a Starfleet ship in that it had the wings, and then you had the wings have the engines at the end. So it kind of felt like it was a similar, not the same design, but of that kind of design as the Starfleet. And I thought that was kind of quite good, really.
So the design is the one that was used for the original series.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's really,
when they say it's an old ship, they're very much saying it's an ancient ship. It's like, if you think this is old, we're talking like 100 years old. This thing has been traveling around the galaxy. You know, I've seen some clanker cars around, but they're usually not more than 20 years old. This one's ancient. So nice little callback, I suppose, to the original series.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I remember them from the original series, and it's nice to go back to that, but it's certainly nowhere near the Next Generation kind of design of this. But I really like the fight because I like this planetary shield that, even though it's primitive, it's still effective. And the same with the bird of prey, the lasers are quite primitive, quite old, but yet, we get the great voice of shields at 89%. That percentage is starting to trip down, which was a nice little callback to the original series. And even just, some of the actions. I love the kind of virtual controls that Rios is using to maneuver it. Really nicely done. But I like the fact that the bird of prey is almost pushing La Sirena towards this planetary grid, which, if you break it, then you have about 1,000 sort of kill probes being launched at you. And it is literally, you're going to be toast. And it kind of reminded me of Krall's swarm drones from Star Trek Beyond, where it attacks the Enterprise and forces it to crash land on the planet that they've gone to check out in this, nebula. And I was kind of expecting something like that to kind of start swarming from the planetary defense shield. But ultimately,
you don't want to destroy the ship and send it to your planet.
No, exactly. But then ultimately, La Sirena gets a ally in the form of an unknown ship and pilot that comes whizzing through to help clip one of the bird's wings, which I thought was really, really good. Yeah.
The reason why they're using a bird of prey versus La Sirena is because La Sirena clearly isn't a warship by any means. They have very little tactical capability as well. So the idea here is you can't put them up against any kind of normal, regular fighting ship at all, because they would just be destroyed in an instant. So I like that they're, as you say, the shields are going down in the battle, and then when this other ship arrives, that's the one that's really taking on the Romulan bird of prey. That's the one that's really in the fight. And if it hadn't have turned up, possibly their mission could have ended very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. But I presume as well, then it is R.I.P. Candor,
I think so.
Who unfortunately we never got to see on screen. But I just like the menace that he was given in terms of moving the Quiris sector with Vashti in it from being something that was actually quite settled when Picard was relocating the Romulans to one where actually it's turned a bit like the Wild West. Exactly. And this planetary shield is almost like the saloon doors that are kind of locked and bolted for this planet to prevent this marauding old bird of prey and Candor. So, yes, R.I.P. Candor, a villain we'll never get to see.
I was really impressed. They have a website, a Wikipedia page effectively dedicated to just Star Trek information, and they already had details up of Candor and who it is, and the character and all that kind of stuff. But all the details are taken from this episode, and because you don't see the character at all, it's just written as they were a captain of a Romulan warbird that had been around for quite a long time. And that's all they had. That's who Candor is.
Excellent stuff.
There you go. Thank you very much, John, because your point directly led into my medium point for the episode. This should normally be a small point. The appearance of a character should be a small point, but it's just such a massive character that it makes it right into my medium point, my Omega directive. The arrival of 7 of 9, Jerry Ryan, back on board a starship is just such a great moment. I like that they're in the middle of this battle here and they're saying to each other, can we possibly beam this person on board? Their ship's about to collapse. It's about to fall apart. And then suddenly they start referring to, that would be very dangerous. What if he's going to kill us? What if he attacks us? And then of course it's 7 that arrives. It's not what they thought at all. It's someone that knows them already. And her only line that we get in this episode is, Picard, you owe me a ship.
Exactly.
So it tells you that there is some difference already. Just even in that one line, you can tell there's some difference in the 7 that we saw at the end of Star Trek Voyager, as that show finished up. Also interesting to note, I guess, having returned from a different quadrant back to Earth at the end of that series of the show, it will probably make you quite well known around the world. So it's not a massive surprise that Picard knows her by name instantly when he sees her. He calls her 07 of 9. But I'm interested to see if there's any kind of history between them that we might see in flashbacks as the episodes go on. Any idea what you think, John?
I'm really hoping that that's the case, because I've really enjoyed these 14-year previously openings to Star Trek Picard. I've enjoyed that backstory and seeing him, and the attack on Mars and him helping the Romulans and his dealings with Starfleet when everything gets pulled. And, even with, his moment here on Vashti, 14 years earlier, and the connections he made there. And so, I really hope we get a 14 years previously, and it's to do with him and 7 of 9, and maybe some role that she had in helping Picard, or maybe it's even further back. Who knows? But I've really enjoyed those. I think they're a nice little element at the start of these episodes.
Yeah.
And so I hope we get some kind of sort of backstory as to how these two know one another. Yeah. We may not, of course, but it would be nice.
Yeah. I'm also hopeful that we're going to get some kind of background detail. I presume this is what we're going to get next episode, but why is 7 of 9 out here? Why is she fighting this fight? Is she a member of the Fenris Rangers? Is she the last hope that's left behind to protect this planet? So I'm also intrigued because we knew that 7 was coming back on the show, and I had assumed that her connection to the show would be that she's on the Borg cube. Yeah. And she had some connection to that, but she's miles away from that. But if Picard happens to be swinging past the Borg cube after they go to a Freecloud, you never know. 7 might be on board since she doesn't have a ship anymore.
Well, definitely. I think in the battle, she gets hit then by the bird of prey. It's kind of last gasp, laser shot that it takes to take revenge. And they beam her out of that, but they don't know who it is. And I do like that, Elnor is there with sword drawn. Picard says, now's the time to fight, possibly.
Yes. Don't take the head off immediately.
But don't take the head off immediately. And just having her materialize on the deck of La Serena was great.
Mm-hmm. It's almost as big as the engage moment at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so good. And do you know, I'm actually really pleased that she's not on the Borg ship, because it's like with Huey. It's kind of like Huey I really enjoyed seeing, but then knowing that he'd become a Romulan effectively, or working for the Romulans. And I was like going, okay, so yeah, there's some kind of bad blood going to happen when him and Picard finally meet. But I just felt that would be beneath 7 of 9.
Right.
And so the fact that she is some kind of freedom fighter, or she's, protecting the planets of this sector, I think is a great thing. It's really cool, yeah. I think.
Yep, definitely. I'm looking forward to more battles with 7 in the future. Let's get on to our final small point for this episode.
Make it so, number 1.
John, make it so.
Yes, my number 1, or my small point, is I love Dr. Jurati's realization on space travel. It's long and it's boring. She's just kind of like bored off her tree. Yeah. And, she's interrupting. She's Rios, who's reading his tragic novel, which then becomes just a conversation killer. As he says, it's about the existential view of living life with the conscious knowledge of your own death. And it's like, okay, if I were her, I would get myself to the hospitality hologram and just get a bar put up or something like that. Or maybe a virtual golf course, who knows, something like that. But I like this. I like the fact that she's just going, yeah, space travel's not what I thought it would be, and it's probably exactly how we all would think of it. This idea that it takes however long to just get to the moon under a normal space shuttle.
Yeah.
this idea of going, sort of inter-system, into kind of galaxy is just like, or sector is, I really like that. But I also then, on top of that, Dr. Jurati is kind of doing a bit of stream of consciousness here. And it's also the revelation that maybe the term space, the name, is not really that great when you consider that it's filled with over 1 trillion stars and planets within just our own galaxy, and there then are 2 trillion galaxies within the universe and all this. So it should actually be called filled with a lot of stuff kind of thing. And I thought that was just really good. It was just a small moment, but I think so far Dr. Jurati, it has kind of it's been a bit arm's length with her. She's been there to just talk about sort of synthetic life and the technology. Yeah. She's been that window into that really, at the Daystrom Institute. But that, I like that we just kind of got this moment where she's kind of become, it's taking so long to get to Freecloud. Yeah. That she's already caught up on 2 years worth of some scientific journal, and it's just, she's kind of going slightly crazy, I reckon.
Going stir crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely, yeah. I think it also underlines the fact that this isn't the standard Star Trek TV show, which most of them now, at least, have been named after the ships that are in there. Deep Space Nine was a station. All the rest of them are pretty much named after ships. This is the first one named after a person. And the characters that are on board here are not people that generally would travel together. The reason why the crew of the Enterprise don't get bored as they're traveling long distances is because they're working aboard effectively a submarine in space. Everybody has a job to do, and when they're not doing a job, they're resting because they need to get up the following day and go to work and do the next job. Jurati's basically a passenger here waiting to do something when she gets to her destination. So very different from anything we've seen in Star Trek before. So I kind of like the idea that she's going completely stir crazy here, going, anybody have anything to do? Anybody going to talk to me about anything? Anything at all? Why didn't she bring more work with her to work on board the ship while she was going, But I like that little joke of it as well.
Yeah. It was just a nice little kind of moment with her. And I want to see her a bit more, I think. I think she might ultimately be a bit evil. She might be a bad person in this, what with Commodore O. We don't quite know whether there's been a deal with the devil there with Jurati, and for what reason. Maybe that she can continue then back working on synthetic research.
Maybe, or maybe to save Bruce Maddox, potentially. Their relationship hasn't really been explored much. This person that everybody's chasing down, everybody's trying to find, they did work together in the past. We know that. So maybe she has some kind of connection with him as a character. Maybe that's the reason.
Yeah. So, Derek, what is your make it so number one small point?
The little point I want to talk about is just something that I thought stood out like a sore thumb in the episode as being, it just felt off in the episode. The dance moment with Narek and Soji, when Narek shows her how to do a floor slide across the floor of the Borg ship as if it's some kind of tradition from the Borg. Obviously, that's the gag. I understand it. But it stands out so much as to why it's in there, because it feels so odd. It feels something that doesn't belong in this show, that there must be a reason it's in there, right? So I was wondering if, in his way of trying to get in at Soji, is he trying to form a memory for Soji that she couldn't possibly have had programmed by a computer? Is that what it is? It's such an odd, weird moment that would stand out to her as being different from the programming that he's talking about being made up. He mentions to her just beforehand that she was said to have been on board a certain ship on a certain date, traveling to a certain place, and he's looked up the ship and knows she definitely wasn't on board that. So he knows all of her background information is faked. So is he doing this very weird thing with her because it's something that would stand out as being completely different to all of the experiences that were programmed into her? That's the only rationale I could come up with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way of justifying something that, yes, it felt a little uncomfortable. It was almost a bit the Harry Potter and Hermione Granger moment from the last Harry Potter movie.
Yeah, you hated that, didn't you?
Where they start dancing in the tent. And I don't know. And maybe it's just me that my first thought in a particular situation would not be to dance in order to relieve the tension or the fear or whatever. Yeah, it seemed a little kind of odd. So I'm definitely with you there. It just was like, I don't know why interpretive dance is being used here for these two characters at all.
Well, it is the Valentine's Day episode, so somebody had to.
I suppose so.
Moment.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, I mean, I kind of preferred most of the stuff around this, as you say, with Narek and that's why I think your theory probably is the good one of trying to sort of get her almost to disrupt her own memories by giving her real ones. And we get that moment with Narek and Narissa at the end where he says, I've planted the first seed of doubt. And she's kind of like, hurry up and keep planting those seeds. You know, you've got a week.
I'll leave you here with your seed for the week. Yeah.
So maybe it's that it is connected with that for sure. So yeah, it just seemed odd, really. But I like your theory to try and cover up the oddness.
I had to come up with something. I did like a lot of the investigation that's going on with Soji, where she's looking into the background of Ramdan, watching TV programs and interviews with her, so she can understand what was going on in her mind before what happened. And I am really intrigued about why it is that these Romulans were the last to be assimilated by this ship, and why all of them seem to have gone slightly crazy after being pulled back out of being Borg. I have a theory about that one as well.
You mean around Rhonda and that almost TV interview that she was doing?
Kind of, yeah. More about the actual reason why the Romulans might be the ones that are having major problems with coming back out from being Borg. So the Borg are a species of organic life with pieces of computers attached to them, or pieces of futuristic technology, we'll say, attached to them. But they've been around for millennia, like most people in the universe. Is it possible that early Romulans were the ones that created Borg, and the reason why we have the Shat-Vash being so against all types of synthetic life is because they once battled against the Borg?
Great theory, and I really like that, Derek. Yeah, that would put a really nice spin on it, and it could be, absolutely. I mean, the idea that it were Romulans who effectively created the Borg, but that might be why. And again, just the sensibility of then modern Romulans, which is anti-technology, that is, in a sense, living, that, you know, an android, a synthetic android, rather than just simply a piece of technology. So just a quick recap, that the Romulans we discover in the first couple of episodes, they don't have a problem with technology. It's to do with almost sentient, synthetic, living organisms like Data, and presumably like something like the Borg. I like that, because I think as well, I can say, I hope that they make it so, number one.
Exactly. And I'm wondering if that's what's driving some of the Romulans mad as they're getting removed from the Borg collective. Is it because they've seen that this was their past? Nobody is aware that these are the people that created the Borg. Or even just are the Borg. You know, one side of the Romulans could have gone off to discover everything about technology while the other side shunned it. And the ones that went off to discover technology became the Borg, effectively. So,
and that would chime well with why then Rhonda calls Soji the Seb Kcheneb, the Destroyer, because the Borgs always ended off assimilating for them, but destroying other species, taking their collective and adding it to the Borg's own. But for those species, it was a destruction of their own culture and species. And so that's why she's called that. It's not like she's some godly thing. It's just that ultimately she will turn Borg in a way, or
that might work.
Lean towards that kind of, I suppose, way of life for an advanced synthetic.
Very you go.
Okay, yeah,
There you
no,
go.
that'd be good.
That's my working theory.
That is
for episode
a
4.
good theory.
Speaking of theories and notes and Easter eggs, stuff like that, is there anything that's popped out in this episode for you, John? I have one quickly to begin with. Just the joke, I suppose, from Narissa to her brother Narek, where she says, "I take it Soji is anatomically correct," to Narek after waking him up in bed, effectively. I think that's a reference to the fact that Data was, let's say, fully functional as an android.
Yes.
Which we learnt in season 1 of The Next Generation when he had that relationship with Tasha Yar. So I'm wondering if it's just a little joke, just to show these are genuinely the offspring of Data. They're just as good as he is, I suppose. They're just as well made as he is, I suppose.
Yeah, that seems fair enough to me. We get to see 2 more holograms aboard Captain Rios's ship. We get the emergency tactical hologram who helps him do the tactical strategy against this decrepit bird of prey who's speaking Spanish and is kind of that was really good, just him coming in and speaking in Spanish and only Spanish.
Now, you say he was helping him, but he just kind of went, he's attacking from the left, Captain. He's like, what about you firing back? Isn't that what you're here for? You know?
And then we got the emergency hospitality hologram, which Rios doesn't really kind of like, but, you know, this hologram prepares an entire mock-up of Chateau Picard in space, a holographic Chateau Picard, which I thought was pretty cool.
What a great way to make sure your set is reused.
Exactly.
It's a holodeck set now. It's exactly the same set that we had on Earth. Down to the letter, it's exactly the same.
And I really like that meeting between Raffi, Picard, Rios, and then Dr. Jurati trying to insert herself into the conversation.
Am I part of the crew now?
Yeah, exactly. I just thought that was really nice, nicely done. I felt it really just added a nice intimacy between Raffi and Picard, actually, which I thought was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really good to see those characters together, isn't it? Because we're so used to seeing the crew of a ship on board having these kind of meetings in the ready room. Now we have them all meeting in Picard's new ready room, which is part of Chateau Picard. So it's kind of cool having that floating out in space. One other Easter egg, the drink that Soji and Narek are drinking is Romulan ale. Well known for the shape of the bottle for Star Trek fans. The only reason I know it is because Dr. McCoy gave a bottle of that to Captain Kirk in one of the earlier Star Trek films back in the 80s, and I remember seeing that scene where he's giving him Romulan ale, and I went back and saw that the actual bottle is exactly the same as the bottle that Narek and Soji are drinking out of. So nice little touches in there.
Yeah, good touch.
Yeah, because, you know, obviously everybody's going to be drinking Romulan ale on a Romulan vessel, of course. You know, they're not going to be ordering in beers or Chateau Picard wine. So,
although that would be a nice little Easter egg in itself, a bottle of Chateau Picard on a Romulan base in a Borg ship.
One other thing that kind of stood out in the episode is probably because when myself and my friends used to watch Star Trek The Next Generation, we always kind of joked about this idea that they got rid of cash and they got rid of all money on Earth to pursue better goals. Yet in the episode here, you hear Rios saying, an easy way to get onto this planet is maybe a cash gift. You could buy your way onto the planet. And you get a little smile from Picard. You know, it just seems odd because we've known for all of these years that Earth no longer has currency, no longer has any money at all. There are some species that value money still, but Earthlings and Starfleet particularly don't value money at all. So it just seemed like an odd line to have in there that a cash gift would be used. I know it's just a joke. I just wanted to be slightly nerdy and pedantic for once.
Yes, that is quite nerdy and pedantic.
Hey, why not? Why not? We do a podcast about Star Trek now.
Absolutely.
John. Might as well be nerdy and pedantic. Overall, John, what did you think of Star Trek Picard, episode 4? Why don't you be absolutely candid?
I will. Again, I'm kind of sticking with a theme here. This is going to be another 4 out of 5. I think this time it's 4 7 of 9s out of 5. So a lot of numbers in my rating.
I genuinely looked at your notes there and thought that said 4 7 of nuns. Which would be a good.
That would be a good one as well. Yes, but that would have to be the Qowat Milat nuns, of course.
Yes.
I love this. I thought we got that nice little space fight. Of course, everyone likes it when you get a bit of a standoff in orbit around a planet. You get the sword fight on Vashti between Picard and this former Romulan senator. And again, I'm really enjoying them exploring Picard's sort of mistakes, really, or, you know, his oversights that he's done, where, you know, he says it himself around, you know, by trying to, you know, the perfect became the enemy of the good, and for other people, then he hasn't done good. You know, he's not liked here on Vashti anymore. It's only with the nuns, with this Qowat Milat sect of nuns, because of that, you know, the previous 14 years, when even Elnor is kind of, you know, he's not seen him for that length of time. So there's kind of a feeling of hurt there. You know, Picard makes mistakes, and I like that they're exploring that. It's really good. Obviously, we get 7 of 9 coming to the rescue as well, which is great. I'm loving the whole Romulan, the immersion and immersiveness of this, of finding out more about Romulan society. I didn't really connect in with Soji and Narek here on this one so much, but I think you have made me think about it differently in discussing it on the podcast. So, you know, I think that's sort of better than what I thought it was, to be honest.
Let's hope I'm right.
And I'm really, really glad that we have gotten a name for the ship that they are traveling through space to get to Freecloud. I just love, again, I want to see more of Raffi a bit as well. I definitely want to see more of Raffi, but I'm warming to Rios. I really enjoyed him in this episode.
Yeah, me too.
Same with Dr. Jurati. And of course we get Elnor, who will be the Star Trek hunk traveling through time and hunkiness to get to Freecloud. But I like the fact that he's an assassin. Very cool. And again, just that whole thing around this sect, it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. He does have a tinge of a black-haired Legolas to him, doesn't he?
Yeah, that's true, actually.
Bit Orlando Bloom. Maybe not a hunk as such, but a bit of a pretty boy who is able to kill people.
Yes, yeah. He's not like a dwarf hunk, but he's kind of
dwarf.
Yeah, so he's not a Gimli if we're taking Lord of the Rings, and he's not quite as delicate looking as he is. I know what he means. He's definitely got that elf-like quality to him, but there's a little bit more breadth to him, I think, than that.
I think it's the pointy ears and the knives, really. That was
exactly.
Pointing it to. Rios is the hunk, right?
That depends on your type, I suppose, really.
Very true.
But yeah, he's kind of more rugged. For those of you who like your captains hunkier and with more body hair, then yes, or beards, I suppose. Yeah. Yes, Rios is the man for you, for sure. So, Derek, what's your thoughts on episode 4 of Star Trek Picard?
Overall, I liked it. Liked it much more the second time watching it. The first time through, I thought it was a little bit slow. And I think because we had that moment of engage, let's get on with this space mission last episode, I was expecting to get on to the space mission. Not stop off for another passenger on the way, you know, but you have to bring this character on board because he is very important to the mission that's going on. You need a Romulan. Of course, if you're going to be going up against the Romulans, you need one of them on your side if you're forming this ragtag group, you know. So it made a lot of sense why the character's on board there. But I think what propelled the episode overall and what I liked most about it really is this impression of how the world was left when Picard couldn't complete his mission because of Starfleet ordering him to step down, and the effect that's had on these people and the effect it's had on Picard and the relationship he has as someone trying to do the right thing. And why he's so apologetic about it. It's not a mistake as such that Picard has made. It's he just expected everybody else thought like him and everybody else would let him come back out here and continue to save these people when actually times changed, political will changed, and the attack on Mars stopped them from allowing him to go back out there. So I liked seeing that impact rather than hearing about it in some stories or in 2 or 3 lines of dialogue. I liked seeing it in an episode once I watched it that second time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really good. Overall, let's get on to some feedback. We will be doing our feedback section at the end of the episode from now on. So if you want to send in your thoughts about any of the episodes to us, email us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or come and join us on our group on Facebook, facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. I put up a spoiler post just before the episode airs in the US each week, and you can tell us your thoughts as you watch the episode so we can discuss it on the podcast. Also, if you want to hear your voice, as John mentioned earlier on, you can go to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com and record up to 90 seconds of your thoughts about the episode, and we'll play it on the show. First up, we have a voicemail from the wonderful Steve Brown.
Hey guys, it's Steve, and this is for The End is the Beginning. Was that it? Yeah. I watched it once. I'm going to watch it again. It's been a tough couple of weeks for me. But I want to agree with you. I'm listening to your podcast now, and I absolutely love that fight scene. I did kind of worry a little bit at the very beginning. It seemed like, and I think you guys started to key in on this before I decided to record this voicemail. It sounded like Patrick Stewart was almost breathing hard and like he was kind of hiding. And then all of a sudden, like halfway through the fight, he just gains this sort of weird energy and comes out strong and fighting. So I was kind of glad to see that, but at the same time, I was a little confused that it seemed that he started out kind of being kind of cowering there behind the desk, and then seeing all those guns that were under the desks and in their holsters and stuff. Were they prepared because of what happened to Dodge, or do you think this is something that Loris and her husband have always had? They've always had the chateau ready for any kind of invasion. I thought that, so I'd love to hear what you guys thought about that. And also, loved seeing him at the very end with the whole engage thing. But where did Allison Pill, the doctor, where did she get the gun that she used to shoot the Romulan with? Did she walk into a house and see a dead Romulan and pick up its rifle and then shoot another one? That seems a little like a stretch for me. For someone to do that, and I didn't get an explanation of that. Maybe when I watch it the second time, it'll make more sense how she got a hold of a gun that one of those guys had. All right, talk to you later.
Thanks so much for that, Steve. I've got to look at that again. The fight that with Lara Chabon and Picard. I didn't notice that he was getting out of breath as he got to the table. I thought he was trying to reach there because that's where he had the weapon stashed effectively, and he's kind of reaching underneath to get to the weapon. As for why the place is kind of kitted out the way that it is, I have to give credit to another podcast I listened to for coming up with this. Because it makes lots of sense. I think it's a fantastic geek who do a Star Trek podcast as well. They were talking about the fact that this is a very well-known person. Ambassador Picard has gone all over the universe, making friends and enemies, and is possibly a target. I know it's been 14 years since he retired, or 13 years since he retired from Starfleet, but he could possibly have enemies. Instead of having Starfleet security officers minding his place 24 hours a day, perhaps Loris and Chabon are his security officers, not just the people that help him on the farm. They are former Tal Shiar. They know what their business is about, but maybe they always expected an attack, firstly because it's him, and secondly because they're also on the run. They're also in hiding. So the two things together means he would need to be protected, and they need to make sure that if they are ever found by the Romulans, they have a ways to protect themselves. Yeah,
I mean, that was my kind of feeling, was that it was less about Picard, other than them being a kind of in plain sight security kind of detail for him, but it was more because that's the only safe place for them to go. Yeah. And so at any moment, the Tal Shiar, not necessarily the Shad Vash or this Black Ops unit, could come to take them out. Because he is well known, so you would probably see them, if he's getting TV interviewed and so on. So it was the fact that the guns were there probably in case there was an attack by Romulans in order to try and, kidnap Loris and Chabon or to kill them. So it was more that for me, I think. And I think you get that feeling from the comics, the Star Trek Picard countdown, that if they do this, they will be hunted forever. They will really be ostracized. So that, to me, was why the guns were loaded out throughout Chateau Picard. Yeah. And also, effectively, whilst not technically military. It's still within the military organization of Starfleet, even though it's an exploratory and research vessel in terms of the USS Enterprise. So Captain Picard has plenty of firearms knowledge.
Sure.
There's no reason why he wouldn't have a gun.
Yeah.
And even though, with all the different species and that, it's not to say that the modern day, or 2349 is safer, might be safer on Earth between humans, but if you've got all these different rogue elements, whether it's rogue synths, underground parts of the Romulan Empire, different aspects of the Klingon Empire, and all that, then it's a dangerous galaxy.
Absolutely. As for Dr. Jurati and her having a gun when she comes into the house, this could be supporting your theory, John, that she is working for the opposition. She comes in, saves the day as her kind of way into this group, maybe. Comes in just the right moment, just at the time of the attack, with the Romulan gun in her hand and shoots somebody. Like, if you came upon a body that's outside and there's a gun sitting beside it, would you pick up the gun naturally? Even if you heard shooting inside the house, she doesn't sound like someone that does have the firearms training you're talking about. Doesn't sound like someone that would be their instant reaction to pick up a gun. So, interesting theory, Steve.
It's difficult, isn't it? I still think there's questions over her, but I kind of just feel that in coming to Picard and with this fight going on, she ultimately arrived at the wrong time, potentially.
Or the right time.
But that, I don't know, one of the Romulan Black Ops was shot through the door and fell outside, so his gun's there. And I suppose ultimately you don't know how you would react, but you probably would cradle it to some degree for your own protection.
Right.
Take a gun. I mean, you see that in plenty of horrors and all that, where they get some kind of weapon. It's normally the kitchen knife to protect themselves. So I kind of just feel it was just maybe that instinctive element of protection, fight or flight. Mm-hmm. But thanks so much, Steve, for the feedback. Always good to hear your thoughts.
I know. We've got another voicemail from Steve on episode 4 coming up in a minute. John, do you want to take another piece of feedback first?
Yeah. Also on episode 3, this time coming in through Facebook, Bob Phillips says, one thing that never seems to change is just how beautiful the people of the future are, which is very good for telly. Well, I tell you, Bob, they get even more pretty in episode 4. Mm-hmm. So Bob continues, so we have the gang together, scientists and strategists, rebel and revolutionary, held by bounds of promise and correlated hopes, all secretly in awe of each other. Good mix for the adventure ahead. Alongside that, we find Soji is unaware of her synth status and that the Picard universe has young at its core. Not a hardcore Trek fan, so is this new or has it always been about symbol and myth? My recollection is that Troy came more from a cognitive behavioral standpoint. Definitely she, she was an empath, and I think, there was even telepaths in other episodes as well. Yeah. So that there is definitely this cognitive behavioral element here to this world, or for certain species within the Star Trek world. I think it's not new. And I don't think symbol and myth is either. I mean, just in terms of the different symbols for like Romulan Empire, Klingon Empire, Vulcans, as well as Starfleet. There's those hardcore symbols, but I think there's always been an element of the myths, and symbolic meaning around different things, in Star Trek. Certainly when you had the Q episodes where he was talking about those cultural myths and symbols that are in such plain sight that you've almost forgotten about them, or you don't know how to interpret them. And that was always the challenge he was giving to Picard, I think.
Absolutely. And there'll certainly be certain races as well. If everybody from the Klingons to the Bajorans, everybody has their own myths and legends and their own symbolism as well. So it would make sense that the Romulans have their own symbolism that we've not heard of before, and they have their own myths. or their own news, as they called it last episode, their own kind of ways of dealing with the world that they've come up with, the way they've evolved. And it makes sense that since we've never seen much of that side of the Romulans before, that it's a good thing to see in this show, since we're seeing all the other sides of this culture of the Romulans. So it makes a lot of sense to bring that in.
Yeah, and Bob finishes out with, and I really liked the trailer home of the future and vaping weed equivalent snake plant straight off the bush. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I must say, in presumably a world of, in 2349, maybe around, I don't know, it could be 20 billion. We're at about 9 at the moment. I kind of like the isolation of Raffi's trailer location. Yes, the vaping straight off the bush seems like a kind of if you had the money and you could just relax in the Vasquez rocks, you could just relax and enjoy a few Chateau Picards in the baking sun. Yeah,
I think this is more to do with the fact that she doesn't have the money, so she's growing this snake plant.
So she's a drug dealer. Is that what we're saying? Okay.
Yeah, she's addicted to snakeweed. And this is why she lives out here. There have been a few jokes about the fact that her trailer home of the future, as you called it, Bob, is sitting on Vasquez Rocks, because Vasquez Rocks apparently is only about 10 minutes from downtown Los Angeles. It's very close to the city of Los Angeles. It's not
this
open
so it's not as isolated as I was thinking.
No. Apparently the reason why it's used as a filming location, and has been used so many times by people in LA for filming movies and filming TV shows, many times for Star Trek, of course, as we mentioned before. The reason why it's used is because it's so close to the city, but looks like it's far away. So she's actually living in a national park, at this time. So, maybe that's where all her money went, and that's why she has to live in this trailer trash home.
If it's good trailer trash.
I don't think she's very proud of her home. She's not.
No, I know she's not, but it looked like all things with the future, even the crapola stuff is probably Wi-Fi'd up to the max. Possibly, and probably pretty good.
Yeah.
Well insulated, keeps the rain off.
It depends on perspective, doesn't it? We saw that in Birds of Prey, that moment when one of the characters walks into Harley Quinn's apartment. She goes, I know it's a bit of a crap hole. And the other character's like, no, it's amazing.
Yeah, so, this place is dope.
So, one person's crap is another person's amazing trailer home in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks so much, Bob, for the feedback. Keep it coming on in. Really good to get your thoughts. Always on point.
There you go. Thank you so much, Bob. Yeah, we've got another voicemail in from Steve Brown on episode 4, this episode that we've been talking about.
Hello, TV Podcast Industries. This is Steve, and this is for the most recent episode of Picard. Absolute candor. Love that title and the tie-in with the whole nuns thing. And just a couple of quick notes, because I only watched it once and I've got to watch it again. But I'm really excited for that ending. We finally get Jerry Ryan. We get 7 of 9. She's the reason that I love Voyager. I just love the actress and everything I've seen her in since then. So I'm so excited that she's finally joined the series, and hope she stays for several episodes. But in this episode, I really like this new character, Elnor. I like the background he has with Picard, and I'm the great fighting skills that he has. And of course, we got our Picard speech that I don't know, have we gotten a real full Picard speech in this series yet? I don't remember. Anyway, talk to you later.
Thanks, Steve. I know how excited you've been to see Seven back on screen, so it's great to have her in the show. It does make sense that they had to get off Earth and get out into space before they see her. So I'm intrigued to see how much or how big she's going to play in the show. I hope she's in the show for the rest of the season, because she is a character I absolutely loved on Voyager as well. So really excited to see her back as well. Elnor's backstory, yeah, intrigued to see this character that knows Picard from many years ago now coming back and having to live in Picard's world now. It could be very interesting. It sounds like he's never left the planet. There's that moment where he's talking about Data having the ginger cat spot and he's never seen a cat in his life. And then we find out later he hasn't left for 14 years from this planet, that he was only supposed to be there for a few months, it sounded like. So, all of the things that he will be experiencing, as he goes out into the universe will be very interesting.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing this character, to be honest. I just like the idea of the dynamic between him and Picard. It almost feels like, we're talking about him, this father figure of Picard, but almost then, he feels abandoned. That's why he has that moment for me where he says he wouldn't bind his sword to Picard's, cause. He says line, "You left me, old man. I see no reason not to do the same to you." And I thought that, that's telling of, he does feel betrayed. He feels abandoned, probably. And I'm glad that he comes around, because ultimately the cause is worthy in accordance with their kind of, criteria and the creed of the Qowat Milat. But you're seeing people that still have loyalty to Picard, yet he's not been the easiest person for them to deal with, or how he has impacted their life. And I like that. I like that dynamic in this series for sure.
But definitely great. I mentioned it earlier on. One of my favorite moments in the episode is Picard's speechifying. It's really good to see him back on form and being that diplomatic character that when he's surrounded by a group. Yeah, really good to see that.
And finally, we have another piece of feedback from Bob Phillips. "What have we learned?" he says. "There's still nothing worse than being a Saint de-haloed unless you annoy the aforementioned Saint Samurai pal and end up decapitated. And that Romulans do not have the sorts of sibling relationships we would consider healthy. And beyond space, stars, holodecks, and hot tea, there is still a delight to be had in sliding along a polished floor in your stockinged feet." Thank you so much, Bob. Yes, I'm loving the Saint de-haloed with Picard, but certainly it's great to have an assassin to come to your aid. But again, I loved the fact that he was like, "Elnor, what are you doing? Please, can you just stop with the killing?
Yeah.
I am former Starfleet on a mission of peace," kind of thing. I do like that.
Yeah, definitely. The two Romulan siblings are very close indeed at times. But again, willingness to strangle one of your siblings is also not something you would consider the proper sibling relationship, really, would you?
No, absolutely. And to be honest, I hadn't really thought of it along the lines of the joy of sliding in socks across a polished floor. That is quite good. Yeah, doing the kind of the cool slide. Yes.
Well, I remember doing it as a kid, but I'm just not too sure whether it was necessary in the episode itself.
Yeah, maybe not.
Thanks so much for that, Bob, and for your other feedback, and thanks so much to Steve as well.
Absolutely. Thanks so much to Steve and Bob for their feedback. It's really good. Fellow Trekkers and Trekkies, please keep on bringing it in for Star Trek Picard for all the episodes so far on, obviously, next episode, episode 5. But I think I hear the clinking of glasses and the pouring of Romulan ale from distinctive bottles. Yes, it is time for the 10 Forward pub quiz. And this week's pub quiz question is: what Earthbook does Picard give to Elnor on his visit to Vashti 14 years previously?
Ooh, very good.
Yes.
Yeah, very important in the episode as well. There's lots of references after the book is revealed, let's say.
Yes, absolutely. So remember, send in your answers to the pub quiz by email. You can send them one at a time or all at once. I think the next episode we have now pretty much sort of cornered down the prizes. So we will give you a full rundown of the prizes available to the winner who gets the most number of questions right from the pub quiz. We will, of course, be doing that on our final episode of this series, which will be our feedback episode.
It'll be a wrap-up episode at the end, after the 10th episode of Picard is released. John, give him the question one last time.
Yes. What Earthbook does Picard give to Elnor on his visit to Vashti 14 years previously?
Excellent. That's it for our discussion of episode 4 of Star Trek Picard. If you fancy a little bit more Picard in your life, a brand new novel came out this week, Star Trek Picard, The Last Best Hope by Dr. Una McCormack. I was reading it this week. I'm up to about chapter 5 so far. It's a really interesting one. It actually feels like they've novelized a season of Star Trek The Next Generation. leading into Picard. It's a lot of diplomatic negotiations, for example, lots of plans for saving everybody, set around the time of the Romulan supernova. So it's set that 14 years ago. So, lots of the characters that we've met in the show so far, Raffi's in there, Admiral Clancy is in there as a lieutenant back in the day. So we get a lot of those kind of, that kind of connection. We have Geordi LaForge is in there building the ships in Mars. We have Bruce Maddox in there. So there's some really interesting, intriguing stuff in there. Some people in my mind now have been taken off the table as possible bad guys. I know we suspect everybody, but some people have been taken off the table after reading their backstory.
Okay.
So have a read of it. If you want to buy it through Amazon, you can head over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com/Picard Candor. Have a link in there for you, and you can go and buy it from Amazon. Thanks so much for joining us. Please stay subscribed to the podcast, and if you enjoy what you hear, you can share it with your friends, because sharing the podcast is sharing the love. It is Valentine's Day after all. I hope you spent the day with someone that you love. Even if that person that you love is yourself. Because as RuPaul famously says, if you don't love yourself, how can you love anybody else?
Exactly. I'll get an amen in here.
There you go. Exactly was not the answer. Amen.
Of course, as well as sharing the podcast, there are many ways you can support us. You can rate us, leave a review, and of course, we are available over on Patreon at patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries if you want to subscribe to us there. And the opening entry price is $1.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to be doing Penny Dreadful. I'm going to be doing a recap of Penny Dreadful over on our Patreon group. Those podcasts will eventually come out on our main feed on TV Podcast Industries, but if you want to get them first, pop on over to Patreon. You should get the first episode of that next week, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, really looking forward to starting Penny Dreadful. But after that, we'll be back to Star Trek Picard with episode 5, Stardust City Rag, next week. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye-bye, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. Keep watching the stars.
Yes, thanks for joining us, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. It's a pleasure for us to discuss all things Star Trek with you. Remember to greet everyone with Yolan True. And after that, keep watching, keep listening, and of course, engage.
And have a Romulan ale. You deserve it. Bye.
Bye.